Yes, 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 yes. I'm pregnant.
No way.
Yeah.
Hello fam, how are you? So happy to finally be here telling you my birth story. I am gonna be 6 weeks postpartum this week. I'm finally feeling ready to start filming again and coming back here. I have Baby Colette here with me in the room. She just ate and she's chilling, about to go to sleep. So if you hear her, she's right there. And this video has been a long time coming. I hadn't filmed it for 2 reasons. One, I just needed some time to assimilate everything. Number 2, I've been super present with Colette and I've really been soaking in every single moment with her. I don't want to miss out on any part of this beautiful newborn stage or any stage of her life. It's honestly been beautiful. So right, let's get started with my birth experience. I had been planning for a home birth ever since the middle of my pregnancy. That's when I decided that I wanted to do a home birth. I've known for a long time that I didn't want my birth to be at a hospital. I wanted it outside of a hospital. And I thought, you know, maybe a birthing center because it's my first time. I'll feel safer like outside of my home. Like a home birth just sounds like too much, you know, for my first baby. I initially wanted a birth center, but as I started to listen to audiobooks, to read books about natural birthing, a home birth started to resonate more with me because my house, where I live, it's where I feel comfortable. Like the thought of like not having to leave in the middle of being in the labor or having to go back to my house after having my baby, like all of that, just being at home started really resonating with me. That's when we hired my midwife and my doula, and Dorian and I made the decision that we were gonna go for a home birth. So after this, I started to get super, a lot more excited. The more I learned about natural birth, about labor, the less I feared it. So Dorian and I took birthing classes, I took some courses, I got into hypnobirthing, and my whole pregnancy, I really educated myself on this. And it was so fun, it was so exciting. It honestly added just a lot of excitement to the whole thing. So we prepared for that, and with my midwife, she, you know, told us what we needed to have at home. We had a birthing pool and everything. Like we literally had everything ready, and it didn't go as planned. So one thing that I've learned from this whole journey is that sometimes you just have to let go of trying to control the situation. So what happened was, you know, I reached 40 weeks, nothing, like my due date. And then once I reached 41 weeks, I started to get a little bit anxious. So that's when I started to really try to induce my labor naturally. Like I started with acupuncture, induction massages. I was taking herbs, drinking all the teas, like literally trying to do everything to get the baby out. And then, you know, nothing was coming, no signs of labor. So my midwife, at the end of my 41 weeks, she gave me a protocol to follow to try to induce the baby a little bit more intense. So it was a protocol that involved pumping, herbs, and doing lunges up and down the stairs. I did it for 3 days, 2 hours each day, and nothing happened. So the day that I reached 42 weeks is when I tried to do the most intense natural inducing thing, which is drink castor oil. For those of you that don't know, when you drink castor oil, it induces labor, but it only happens if you and the baby are ready to go into labor. So I took the castor oil thinking, this is gonna get me into labor. This is gonna induce my labor. And nothing happened. The day that I reached 42 weeks in the evening, My midwife came over and she said, okay, I'm gonna come over and I'm gonna do a membrane sweep on you to try to induce the labor naturally. So she came and she checked my cervix and she took out her fingers and she's like, I wasn't able to sweep your membranes because you're not dilated. You're not even 1 centimeter dilate. I think I was like 0.5. And I had to be at least like 1 or 1.5 for her to sweep my membranes. And then she felt my belly and she said, the baby's still really high up. Part of the reason is because I had a lot of amniotic fluid. So a few days before I turned 42 weeks, I went to get an ultrasound because I wanted to check, see that everything was going good. And she was completely healthy. The ultrasound said she weighed around 8 pounds, but the ultrasounds are usually always wrong by about a pound. And I had a lot of amniotic fluid. Like, that's one of the reasons why sometimes it's dangerous to continue the pregnancy after 40 weeks, after 41 or 42, because of the less amniotic fluid that you can have inside, and that can cause problems to the baby. But my amniotic fluid was perfect. And maybe that's part of the reason why she was so high and she was able to still like move around, you know? She wasn't like flipping, she was head down, but she was definitely moving. And so when she tried to sweep my membrane and she wasn't able to, she was like, okay, we need to talk about like what we're gonna do. So in the hospital, usually they will induce you at 40 or 41 weeks. Like they don't really let you go past, like even reach 42 weeks is like not heard of. And she was like, okay, I'm not really able to deliver the baby too much longer after 42 weeks. There's not really like a cutoff time, but she was like, we need to talk about like what's gonna happen. And she said, I recommend that you go to the hospital. She said, think about it, talk about it with Dorian, and then let me know tomorrow what you decide. She said, I recommend that you go in on Wednesday. This was a Monday. So that night, Dorian and I talked about it and we thought, okay, maybe we go to the hospital or maybe we wait a few more days, get another ultrasound on Tuesday. That will buy us more time because each ultrasound is good for 3 days, and then wait until Friday. And then if by Friday I haven't gone into labor, we go to the hospital. So we mentioned this the next day to my midwife and she said, yes, you could do that, but I wouldn't recommend it because if you arrive to the hospital at 42 weeks plus 4 days, they're not gonna treat you that well. They're gonna see you as more of an emergency and they might not let you do things as you want in the hospital, like try to induce it with the least interventions as possible, which is what I essentially wanted. So hearing that was like another confirmation to me of like, just go to the hospital now. And at this point, I think the idea of like having my home birth wasn't that important. It was, what was more important to me in that moment was just having my baby in my arms. I decided to just go to the hospital. So then she's like, okay, if you're gonna go into the hospital, I suggest that you go today. So it was a Tuesday, this was in the morning, and I was like, okay. So she said, yeah, it was like 9 a.m. She's like, I think there's a midwife on call that I know really well, and I think you should go in today so she can see you and check you in and everything. So I was like, oh my gosh. Quickly packed for the hospital. I did not have a hospital bag, which was a mistake. I should have packed one, but I didn't even know what to pack. So I just packed some stuff like light, and then we packed my birthing affirmations that I was gonna have in my room, my essential oil diffuser. A friend ended up bringing some LED candles so we could make the room like how we wanted it and like set the mood how I initially wanted it at home. So we are on our way to the hospital and I am now 42 weeks and 1 day. My midwife checked me yesterday. I've literally tried everything to try to induce naturally, and apparently my baby's just floating still up and she hasn't really engaged in my pelvis, which hasn't helped for the natural spontaneous labor to occur. You know, it was gonna come to this point eventually, if she didn't come, to where we would have to make a decision of if we go to the hospital to get induced. You know, it's my first baby, my first birth. This is the first time that my body is doing this. So for first time mamas, it just like, it takes a little more time. So we're gonna make the best out of this experience, and praying for the best, and I'll see you guys on the other side. We arrived to the hospital, and this whole time I wasn't feeling good. Like, I wasn't feeling 100% sure with the decision that I had made to go to the hospital. Like, deep down inside me, I knew that I didn't want to be there, that I shouldn't be there, but I wasn't strong enough, I feel, to like follow that intuition in that moment, because I just felt like really clouded and blinded to what I should do, and the 42 weeks, and the, you know, what if something happens? And it's crazy how your mind is so powerful, and it can lead you into like a different direction. And I admit that, you know, and I even knew that arriving to the hospital, like, maybe this is what I should do, like wait until the baby's ready, but I don't feel strong enough. So we got to the hospital, checked in. My family got there because they were planning to come for Thanksgiving, thinking that the baby would already be born. So my parents and brother and sister came to the hospital. They came to say goodbye and brought us food. We arrived to the hospital and we got to the room, and I was pleasantly surprised with the room. I was like, okay, this is like nice. This feels cozy. This doesn't feel cold. There's no bright lights, and it felt very private. And one thing that I really liked about this hospital was that it was all midwife run. So there's no doctors. It's just midwives and nurses. And a lot of the women that are coming into the hospital are transfers from either a home birth or a birthing center. Not all of them, but most of them, a lot of them. And it's really nice because they understand where you're coming from. They understand that you're coming from like this home birth mentality, and most women that want to have a home birth want to have the least amount of interventions. So they're not pushy at all, and like, you know, we think you should do this or do that and like this. As soon as we checked in, I was like, listen, I want to try to get this baby out with the least amount of interventions, and do it as naturally as possible. And they're like, okay, great, like, let's do it. So I really like that. They checked my cervix. I was 2 centimeters dilated. So they said, okay, let's start with this like Foley tube. It's like 2 balloons. One part of the balloon is like on top of your cervix, and the other part on the bottom of your cervix, and your cervix is like in the middle. So they said, okay, let's do this, and this will help you dilate. It will also give you some contractions, and hopefully your body will pick up on what's going on and will go into labor. So this was around like Tuesday, like in the evening, like around 5 p.m. They put in the Foley tube, and I had the effect for 12 hours. And in those 12 hours, I was having contractions like the whole time. I remember like around midnight, 11 p.m. midnight, the contractions were getting like actually strong, where I couldn't really talk through the contractions. Like, I had to really breathe and concentrate through them. And my doula was like, okay, this is like good. Like this, I feel like you're actually, like these contractions are doing something. So that was that whole night. And then the next morning around 5 a.m., the contractions stopped. But they checked me again, and I was around 4.5 centimeters dilated, which was good. It was an improvement, but my body didn't pick up on like, hey, it's labor time. And so we needed something else. This is when they started to induce me with PITOCIN. And I agreed to PITOCIN, and this whole time that this was going on, it's like, okay, I am so aware of all this like cascade of interventions, and I literally like came to the hospital to do this, like knowing that this is what I did not want. And even before they put in the PITOCIN, I even said to Dorian, I was like, what if we just leave? Like, what if we just like go? But at that point, I was like, you know, I'm here, let's just do this. So they put in the PITOCIN. And for those of you that don't know what PITOCIN is, it's a drug that makes you have contractions. So it makes your body have contractions. They're not real, but those contractions, if your body's ready and the baby's ready, they'll make you go into labor. They'll help the baby like descend, they'll help you dilate. But if the baby's not ready and you're not ready, it won't work. Got the PITOCIN in that morning, and they start at like a very low dose and start increasing like every half hour, they increase the dose. So every half hour, I started feeling a little bit more. I started feeling the contractions that day around 1 p.m. That's when I started to feel like, you know, I'm in labor. Literally, like you are in labor. It's like fake labor, but it's labor. It's kind of weird. really want to have my baby. Started feeling the contractions. My doula was there. Well, actually, I had 2 doulas at the hospital that were alternating. We always had someone there, and which was really good because Dorian really needed that support. I mean, Dorian was just like, wow, amazing. He was with me in every single contraction, literally. Like, he didn't work at all those days. He was completely 100% super present with me. Like, what do you need? So he was making bone broth for me, getting my coconut water, and just, I felt so supported by him that whole time. And it was beautiful. Like, that was so beautiful to just feel him there. Another thing that was beautiful during this time is that once I told my friends here in Austin that I was going to the hospital, everyone was so supportive. I had a friend, Adi, if you watch this, thank you, I love you. She did a meal train for me, and a meal train is basically like people sign up to bring you food. We had friends from our community bringing us food, checking in on us, calling Dorian, texting Dorian, like, what do you need? And they knew that obviously I was planning for a home birth and that wasn't happening. And they really showed up for me in the most beautiful and authentic way. And I'm so grateful for that. You know, I was in labor that whole day, and by the night, like around, 10 p.m. or something, like I started feeling really tired. I hadn't slept because I had the Foley tube the previous night. I wasn't really eating. I had been feeling the contractions that whole day without any pain meds, and I was feeling really tired. So I slept for like 4 hours. And when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like a new human. I felt super rested, which was good, but at the same time, I was bummed because my body like never picked up on labor. So all those contractions were just from the PITOCIN. Like, my body never got into labor. It was like 3 a.m. or something. They came back in, put me back on the PITOCIN, and this time they started cranking it up a little bit quicker. So it was, like 2-3 hours into that, I started to feel like really strong contractions because the PITOCIN was high. So then I had those contractions for, I don't know, I want to say like 4 or 5 hours, and they were like really painful. Like, I was feeling it in my back, I was feeling it in the front. My Dorian was massaging me in the front, and then my doula was massaging me in the back. And she's like, these contractions are like, you would be having these contractions if you were like about to have the baby, if you were in active labor. So I had those contractions for a while. And then at one point I was like, this is like too much. Like, I can't take this anymore. Like, it was just so many hours, super painful. And so the nurse came, the midwife came, she's like, okay, I'm gonna check you. You've been on high PITOCIN for a while, so let's see if there's any progress. So she checked me, and I was 5 centimeters dilated. And I was like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, I've been in labor, at this point I had been in labor for definitely over 24 hours. Like, I don't know, it had been like a long time, like maybe 30 hours or something. And she's like, okay, what do you think about we put in the epidural so we can crank up the PITOCIN and see if those stronger contractions do something. Okay guys, I missed something of the story, a very important part. The previous day when I started the PITOCIN, I had my water broke because I was already at 4 centimeters dilated, and they were able to break my water. So they broke my water like around 11 noon or something like that. And that was like, when they break your water, it's supposed to help with the induction, So fast forward the next day, it had already been almost 24 hours since my water had been broken, which is not good because the more time that passes after your water breaks, the higher the chance of you having an infection, you and the baby postpartum, especially if you're having a lot of cervical checks. And I wasn't having like a ton, but I was having quite a few cervical checks during that whole time. So my doula was getting a little nervous of like, okay, it's already been almost 24 hours and this is not good. You run a higher risk of infection and it can make the postpartum a lot harder for you and the baby. So when the midwife suggested to get the epidural, you know, they had suggested it before, but I was saying no the whole time. I was like, no, I don't want any pain. I don't want pain meds. Like, I just want the least amount of things going in my body as possible. So when she suggested the epidural, by that time I was like, yes, like I want the epidural right now. Like, I need it. So that's when they put in the epidural. And she's like, I'm just gonna put it in for 3 hours. We'll crank up the PITOCIN and we'll see if we have any progress. They put the epidural in, and this whole time I hadn't cried at all. When they put the epidural in, that's when I started bawling. Like, I was like, how am I here? Like, this is what I like least wanted. I didn't want the epidural. I didn't want the PITOCIN, and I'm here. It was just, and just the fact of like knowing that that was going in my body, that was going in my baby, like that's what I didn't want. I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And like I said, like I wanted to feel the pain, but at that point it had been so many hours of being in labor. Mind you, I wasn't eating anything, barely slept at all, obviously. So I was like, let's give this a try. So during those 3 hours, my doula was like, listen, if there's no progress, I think we really need to start thinking about a C-section. You've been in labor for a lot of hours. There's not really much progress in the dilation. The baby hasn't descended. The baby was still super high. And on top of that, it's been almost 24 hours since your water broke. And that's what like worried her the most, was the infection, like the risk of infection for me and for the baby. So that's like, I remember Dorian and I just looking at each other like, is this like really happening? But we had come to a point where that was like our only option, because we had literally already tried everything. So midwife comes back, she checks my cervix, still stuck at 5. No progress during the whole time. And at that point I was like, you know what? Yeah, like she said, let's, I'll leave you a few minutes so you can talk about it. She left, and we talked, Dorian and I and my doula, we talked and we decided that that was the best decision at that moment. It's either being here for a few more hours with PITOCIN, with the epidural, trying to progress. I've already been here for over 30 hours. I haven't seen any progress, or just getting it done with, having a C-section, and that's it. So that's what I decided. I decided to just go in for the C-section. The midwife comes back, we tell her, yes, we're gonna do a C-section. And then the doctor quickly came. It was Thanksgiving Day, and I think there was like barely anyone at the hospital, so everything happened really quickly. The doctor came, signed some papers. We told her like, hey, listen, if we're gonna do a C-section, we need to have like the baby come to the mom as soon as the baby's born, have that skin to skin, have the golden hour on my chest. We want to keep our placenta, and we want delayed cord clamping. So they said yes to bringing the baby as soon as the baby was born, minus like a minute and a half when she was gonna be born, that NICU had to take her in the same room, but just like on the corner, check her, and then they would put her on my chest. We tried to like tell them if they could bring the baby like right away, and they said no, which was unfortunate. But I was happy that at least, you know, they would bring the baby to my chest as soon as she was born. And then for the delayed cord clamping, that was impossible, because with a C-section, everything happens really quick, and they had to like suture me. As soon as the baby comes out, they like start sewing you and suturing you back up. They said yes to the placenta, so we were able to keep the placenta. Then a few minutes later, they put me into this roller bed. They take me to the operation room, and it's just a room that like everything that really never thought that it would happen to me. Never. So this whole time I was just focusing on like accepting the situation and just like sending love to my body and talking to my baby and telling Colette like, we're gonna meet each other really soon, everything's gonna be fine, like telling her what was about to happen. I'm gonna have a C-section, they're gonna cut me up, they're gonna take you out, but then they're gonna bring you right to my chest. So I was telling her this the whole time, that way she felt for me that everything was gonna be fine and we were gonna meet each other really soon. Around 10 minutes later, they let Dorian and my doula come in. They're like, I have my doula here and I have Dorian here, right here with me. And they're like, okay, you're gonna meet your baby in 5 minutes. And it's literally like a screen that you can see through. So I was able to see everything. And I have pictures actually of like when they took her out. My doula was taking pictures and I was able to see like when they took her out. And it was, oh my gosh, it was the craziest thing. I was in shock. Like Dorian was crying. I was in shock. I was like, how is a human coming out of me right now? It was crazy. So they took her out. Everything was so quick. NICU took her to like the corner. Dorian went with the baby. So the baby was always with us the whole time ever since she was born. And then like a minute and a half later, they bring her to my chest and she's there. And we stay there for like 25 minutes in the operation room.
Yes, baby.
Okay, you want the ball.
Oh, are you ready for that? Oh, yes.
I'm just like, I love you. Like, I'm just telling her that I love you, that I'm so excited to finally meet her. And I was just over the moon. Like at that point, I was like the C-section thing was like not even going through my head. Like I had my baby in my arms and I was just so happy. And luckily I was sane. Like I was numb from like up here down, but I was conscious of everything. So they put her on my chest and then they put me back on the rolling bed to take me back to our original room. And then Dorian takes the baby in this like, I don't know, it was like a little bed, like a rolling bed. So Dorian took the baby. And then once we got to the room, they had to do some things on me. So the baby had skin to skin with Dorian for a few minutes. And then they brought her back to my chest.
Aww. She's so perfect.
So when they brought her back to my chest, that's when we did the latch. And that was like a whole another issue on itself. And I could do another video on that. That's like another story. So if you guys want me to talk about that, let me know in the comments below. My doula took the placenta. I got it, she made capsules out of it and brought it to my house like a couple days later. And we ended up staying at the hospital, I think 2 more nights. And the recovery from C-section is tough. Like you don't feel anything when it's happening, but after 24 hours after the C-section, like, oh my gosh, the pain was like so bad. I mean, I actually took like Tylenol and this other pain med because it was like really bad. And they put you through like this catheter, so you can't even go pee, you can't go poop. You don't feel when you're going pee, so it's all going through a catheter. And the nurse is coming, you know, every so often, every few hours to like empty it out. It was just really weird. I couldn't really get up from the bed like the first 24 hours. So Dorian was changing the baby's diapers the first 2 days. And then Dorian would just bring the baby to me in the bed. And so I can nurse the baby. Getting up from the bed to go to the rocking chair in the hospital room was so painful. And I was so tired because I hadn't really slept, I hadn't really eaten. And with the C-section, I couldn't really eat. Like I didn't eat for like 4 days, like barely ate anything, because everything I ate, I would end up throwing up. I felt like 2 trucks had run over me. But then at the same time, I was like on this high of like, my baby's here, and I couldn't stop staring at her. And I was just over the moon and so happy about that. So it was really weird to have that duality of like feeling like shit, basically, sorry. And then feeling like super happy. Yeah, we were there in the hospital for 2 more days. My family came to visit. Friends were dropping off food the whole time, checking in on us, sending us flowers and cookies, and just they were just the sweetest. Like it was just too much, you know, that I felt like to receive, but super grateful. I have accepted the fact that I had a C-section, that I didn't want that, but I've also accepted the fact of what is, and like I see the beauty in it. And at the end, I feel like she chose to be born via C-section for a reason, to teach me something. And I truly believe that. And yeah, so there's so many lessons learned. The lesson to listen to my intuition, be flexible, the lesson to accept what is, to let go of trying to control situations. I mean, so many lessons. And yeah, so this is my birth story. I feel like every birth story that I hear, I learned something, whether it happened the way that the person was planning or whether it didn't. So that's why I really wanted to share it with you guys so that you can take whatever helps you. If there's one advice that I can give you, if you're gonna have, especially if you're gonna have a hospital birth, is to really educate yourself on like the cascade of interventions and like how each one leads to another. And that's exactly what happened to me. Like the PITOCIN led to the epidural. The epidural usually will lead to a C-section. So that's what happened to me. So I would just recommend you to get educated on that, have knowledge, and if you're gonna have a hospital birth, speak up, be really clear about what you want and what you don't want. Okay guys, so this is it. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions, comments, let me know in the comments below. I'll try to answer as many as possible, and I can even answer some of your questions regarding my birth experience in the next vlog. Send you a big hug, lots of love, light, and I'll see you in the next one.